The Curtiss C-46 Commando is a transport aircraft derived from the Curtiss CW-20 pressurized high-altitude airliner design. Early press reports used the name Condor III, but the Commando name was in use by early 1942 in company publicity. It was used as a military transport during World War II by the United States Army Air Forces and also the U.S.Navy Marine Corps, which used the designation R5C. The C-46 served a similar role to its counterpart, the Douglas C-47 Skytrain, but was not as extensively produced. At the time of its production, the C-46 was the second largest twin-engined aircraft in the world, and was one of the 5 heaviest twin-engined aircraft to see service in World War II. After World War II, a few surplus C-46 aircraft were briefly used in their originally designated role as passenger airliners, but the glut of surplus C-47s dominated the marketplace and the C-46 were soon relegated to primarily cargo duty. The type continued in U.S. Air Force service in a secondary role until 1968. However, the C-46 continues in operation as a rugged cargo transport for Arctic and remote locations, with its service life extended into the 21st century. Design and development. The prototype for what would become the C-46, the Curtiss CW-20, was designed in 1937 by George A. Page, Jr., the chief aircraft designer at Curtiss-Wright. The CW-20 was a private venture intended to compete with the 4-engine Douglas DC-4 and Boeing Stratoliner by the introduction of a new standard in pressurized airliners. The CW-20 had a patented fuselage conventionally referred to as a figure 8, which enabled it to better withstand the pressure differential at high altitudes. This was done by having the sides of the fuselage creased at the level of the floor that not only separated the two portions but shared in the stress of each, rather than just supporting itself. The main spar of the wing could pass through the bottom section, which was mainly intended for cargo without intruding on the passenger upper compartment. A decision to utilize a twin-engine design instead of a 4-engine configuration was considered viable if sufficiently powerful engines were available, allowing for lower operating costs and a less complex structure. Engineering work involved a 3-year commitment from the company and incorporated an extensive amount of wind tunnel testing at the California Institute of Technology. The resultant design was a large but aerodynamically sleek airliner incorporating the cockpit in a streamlined glazed dome. The engines featured a unique nacelle tunnel cowl, where air was ducted in and expelled through the bottom of the cowl, reducing turbulent airflow and induced drag across the upper wing surface. After a mock-up was constructed in 1938, Curtiss-Wright exhibited the innovative project as a display in the 1939 New York World's Fair. Although the company had approached many airlines in order to obtain the requirements for an advanced airliner, no firm orders resulted, although 25 letters of intent were received, sufficient to undertake production. The design of a 24 to 34 passenger airliner proceeded to prototype stage as the CW-20 at the St. Louis, Missouri facility, with the initial configuration featuring twin vertical tail surfaces, powered by two 1,700 horsepower R260C14BA2 Wright twin Cyclones. The prototype, registered NX-19436, flew for the first time on the 26th of March 1940 with test pilot Edmund T. Eddie Allen at the controls. After testing, modifications were instituted, including the fitting of a large single tail to improve stability at low speeds. The first prototype was purchased by the United States Army Air Forces to serve as a master for the series and was designated C-55, but after military evaluation, the sole example was returned to Curtiss Wright and subsequently resold to the British Overseas Airways Corporation. During testing, General Henry H. Hap Arnold became interested in the potential of the airliner as a military cargo transport and on 13 September 1940, ordered 46 modified CW-20s as the C-46 EU Commando. The last 21 aircraft in this order were delivered as model CW-20Bs, called C-46A1CU. None of the C-46s purchased by the U.S. military were pressurized, and the first 30 delivered to the AAF were sent back to the factory for 53 immediate modifications. The design was then modified to the C-46A configuration, receiving enlarged cargo doors, a strengthened load floor and a convertible cabin that speeded changes in carrying freight and troops. The C-46 was introduced to the public at a ceremony in May 1942, attended by its designer, George A. Page, Jr. A total of 200 C-46s in 2 initial batches were ordered in 1940, although only 2 were actually delivered by December 7, 1941. At this time, one other important change was made. More powerful 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Amp Whitney R2800 double wasp engines replaced the 2 Wright twin Cyclones. By November 1943, 721 modifications had been made to production models, although many were minor, such as fuel system changes and fewer cabin windows were also adopted. Subsequent military contracts for the C-46A extended the production run to 1,454 examples, 40 of which were destined for the U.S. Marine Corps, to be designated R5C1. The military model was fitted with double cargo doors, a strengthened floor and hydraulically operated cargo handling winch. 40 folding seats were the sole passenger accommodation for what was essentially a cargo hauler. Tests indicated that the production C-46 was capable of carrying a substantial payload and could fly well on one engine. When empty, the aircraft could even climb on one engine at 200 to 300 feet per minute. The final large production run C-460 arrived in 1944-45 and featured single doors to facilitate paratroop drops. Production totaled 1,430 aircraft, although a one-off XC-46B experimented with a stepped windscreen and uprated power plants. A small run of 17 C-46s had many of the same features as the XC-46B, along with 3-bladed Hamilton standard propellers replacing the standard Curtiss electric 4-bladed units. A last contract for 234 C-46Fs reverted to the earlier cockpit shape but introduced square wingtips. A sole C-46G had the stepped windscreen and square wingtips, but the end of the war resulted in the cancellation of any additional orders for the type. Operational history. Pacific Theater, most famous for its operations in the China-Burma-India Theater and the Far East. The Commando was a workhorse in flying over the hump, transporting desperately needed supplies to troops in China from bases in India. A variety of transports had been employed in the campaign, but only the C-46 was able to handle the wide range of adverse conditions encountered by the USAAF. Unpredictably violent weather, heavy cargo loads, high mountain terrain, and poorly equipped and frequently flooded airfields proved a considerable challenge to the transport aircraft then in service, along with a host of engineering and maintenance nightmares due to a shortage of trained air and ground personnel. After a series of mechanical problems were controlled if not surmounted, the C-46 proved its worth in the airlift operation in spite of continuing maintenance headaches. It could carry more cargo higher than other Allied twin-engine transport aircraft in the theater, including light artillery, fuel, ammunition, parts of aircraft and, on occasion, livestock. Its powerful engines enabled it to climb satisfactorily with heavy loads, staying aloft on one engine if not overloaded, though war emergency load limits of up to 40,000 pounds often erased any safety margins. Nevertheless, after the troublesome Curtiss electrically controlled pitch mechanism on the propellers had been removed, the C-46 continued to be employed in the CBR and over wide areas of southern China throughout the war years. Even so, the C-46 was referred to by ATC pilots as the Flying Coffin, with at least 31 known instances of fires or explosions in flight between May 1943 and March 1945, and many others missing and never found. Other names used by the men who flew them were the Whale, the Curtiss Calamity, and the Plumber's Nightmare. The C-46's huge cargo volume, 3 times the weight, large cargo doors, powerful engines and long range also made it suitable for the vast distances of the Pacific Island campaign. In particular, the U.S. Marines found the aircraft useful in their amphibious Pacific operations, flying supplies in and wounded personnel out of numerous and hastily built island landing strips. Europe, although not built in the same quantities as its more famous wartime compatriot, the C-47 Skytrain, the C-46 nevertheless played a significant role in wartime operations, although the aircraft was not deployed in numbers to the European theater until March 1945. It augmented USAF Troop Carrier Command in time to drop paratroopers in an offensive to cross the Rhine River in Germany. So many C-46s were lost in the paratroop drop during Operation Varsity that Army General Matthew Ridgway issued an edict forbidding the aircraft's use in future airborne operations. Even though the war ended soon afterwards and no further airborne missions were flown, the C-46 may well have been unfairly demonized. The operation's paratroop drop phase was flown in daylight at low speeds at very low altitudes by an unarmed cargo aircraft without self-sealing fuel tanks, over heavy concentrations of German 20mm, 37mm, and larger caliber anti-aircraft cannon utilizing explosive, incendiary, and armor-piercing incendiary ammunition. By that stage of the war, German aircrews had trained to a high state of readiness. Many batteries had considerable combat experience in firing on and destroying high-speed, well-armed fighter and fighter-bomber aircraft while under fire themselves. Finally, while many, if not all of the C-47s used in Operation Varsity had been retrofitted with self-sealing fuel tanks, the C-46s received no such modification. Although 19 of 72 C-46 aircraft were shot down during Operation Varsity, it is not as well known that losses of other aircraft types from AA fire during the same operation were equally as intense, including 13 gliders shot down, 14 crashed, and 126 badly damaged, 15 B-24 bombers shot down, and 104 badly damaged, 12 C-47s shot down, with 140 damaged. Despite its obvious and valuable utility, the C-46 remained a maintenance nightmare throughout its AAF career. The official history of the Army Air Forces summarized its shortcomings, but from first to last, the Commando remained a headache. It could be kept flying only at the cost of thousands of extra man-hours for maintenance and modification, although Curtiss Wright reported the accumulation by November 1943 of the astounding total of 721 required changes in production models. The plane continued to be what maintenance crews around the world aptly described as a plumber's nightmare. Worse still, the plane was a killer, in the experienced hands of Eastern Airlines and along a route that provided more favorable flying conditions than were confronted by military crews in Africa and on the hump route into China. The plane did well enough. Indeed, Eastern Airlines lost only one C-46 in more than 2 years of operation, but among the ATC pilots the Commando was known, with good reason, as the Flying Coffin. From May 1943 to March 1945, Air Transport Command received reports of 31 instances in which C-46s caught fire or exploded in the air. Still others were listed merely as missing in flight, and it is a safe assumption that many of these exploded, went down in flames, or crashed as the result of vapor lock, carburetor icing, or other defects. During the war years, the C-46 was noted for an abnormal number of unexplained airborne explosions that were initially attributed to various causes. In particular, the fuel system, which was quickly designed, then modified for the new thirstier Pratt & Amp Whitney engines, was criticized. The cause of the explosions was eventually traced to pooled gasoline from small leaks in the tanks and fuel system, combined with a spark, usually originating from open-contact electrical components. Though many service aircraft suffered small fuel leaks in use, the C-46's wings were unvented. If a leak occurred, the gasoline had nowhere to drain, but rather pooled at the wing root. Any spark or fire could set off an explosion. After the war, all C-46 aircraft received a wing vent modification to vent pooled gasoline, and an explosion-proof fuel booster pump was installed with shielded electrical selector switches in lieu of the open-contact type used originally. Post-war overall, the C-46 had been successful in its primary role as a wartime cargo transport, and had benefited from a series of improvements. Like the C-47 DC-3, the C-46 seemed destined for a useful career as a post-war civilian passenger airliner, and was considered for that purpose by Eastern Airlines. However, the high operating costs of the C-46 soon caused most operators to change their minds. Consequently, most post-war C-46 operations were limited to commercial cargo transport, and then only for certain routes. One of the C-46's major drawbacks was the prodigious fuel consumption of its powerful 2,000 horsepower engines, which used fuel at a much higher rate than the C-47 DC-3. Maintenance was also more intensive and costlier. Despite these disadvantages, surplus C-46s were used by some air carriers, including Capital, Flying Tigers, Civil Air Transport and World Airways, to both carry cargo and passengers. Many other small carriers also eventually operated the type on both scheduled and non-scheduled routes. The C-46 became a common sight in South America, and was widely used in Bolivia, Peru, Brazil, Argentina and Chile, especially in mountainous areas to overfly deep jungle terrain where ground transport was impracticable. C-46 Commandos also went back to war. A dozen surplus C-46s were purchased in the U.S. covertly for use in Israel's 1948 War for Independence and flown to Czechoslovakia in a circuitous route along South America and then across to Africa. The type's long range proved invaluable flying cargo, including desperately needed dismantled S-199 fighters from Czechoslovakia as well as other weapons and military supplies. On the return flight, the C-46s would dump bombs out the cargo door on various targets at night, including Gaza, El Arish, Majdael, and Fallujah. C-46s served both Korea and Vietnam for various USAF operations, including resupply missions, paratroop drops, and clandestine agent transportation. The C-46 was not officially retired from service with the U.S. Air Force until 1968. The type also served under a U.S. civilian agency, the Central Intelligence Agency. The C-46 played a supporting role in many clandestine operations during the late 1940s and early 1950s, including resupply efforts to Chiang Kai-shek's troops battling Mao's communists in China as well as flying cargoes of military and medical supplies to French forces for Giallam Airfield in Hanoi and other bases in French Indochina. The CIA operated its own airline for these operations, Civil Air Transport, which was eventually renamed Air America in 1959. And Air America C-46 was the last fixed-wing aircraft flown out of Vietnam at the close of hostilities there. On the 29th of April 1975, Captain E. G. Adams flew a 52-seat version, with 152 people on board, to Bangkok, Thailand. The C-46 was also employed in the abortive U.S.-supported Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961. The Republic of China Air Force operated the C-46 up until 1982, at which time it was retired from service. Although the numbers gradually began to dwindle, C-46s continued to operate in remote locations, and could be seen in service from Canada and Alaska to Africa and South America. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, the Canadian airline Lamair operated several C-46s from the bases in Thompson and Churchill, Manitoba. One of the largest C-46 operators was Air Manitoba, whose fleet of aircraft featured gaudy color schemes for individual aircraft. In the 1990s, these aircraft were divested to other owner-operators. Between 1993 and 1995, Relief Air Transport operated 3 Canadian-registered C-46s on Operation Lifeline Sudan from Lokichogio, Kenya. These aircraft also transported humanitarian supplies to Goma, Zaire and Mogadishu, Somalia from the base in Nairobi, Kenya. One of the aircraft, GIX-Z, was lost near Lokichogio, while the remaining 2 eventually made their way back to Canada. Buffalo Airways currently owns 2 C-46s and actively operates one, primarily used in Canada's Arctic. Their aircraft have been featured on the Ice Pilots NWT television show. 2 C-46s, formerly owned and operated by Relief Air Transport in Africa, were operated as freighters for First Nations transportation in Gimli, Manitoba, but the airline has now ceased operations, with one aircraft sold to Buffalo Airways and the other tied up in receivership. According to First Nations Transport, as of January 2016, the aircraft is claimed to be airworthy with 2 new engines and available for sale, with the fire bottles and props needing updates. The Japan Air Self-Defense Force used the Commando until at least 1966, when they began development of the Kawasaki C-1. Prices for a used C-46 in 1960 ranged from £20,000 for a C-46F conversion to £60,000 for a C-46R. Variants: Original passenger airliner design, CW20T. The original passenger airliner prototype fitted with a dihedral tailplane and end-plate vertical tail fins, powered by two 1,700 horsepower Wright R2600 twin cyclone radial piston engines. CW20A company designation of the C-55. CW20B company designation of the C-46A. Company designation of the C-46B. Company designation of the C-46D. Company designation of the C-46E. Company designation of the C-46F. Company designation of the C-46G. CW20E company designation of the AC-46K. CW20G company designation of the AC-46C. CW20H company designation of the AC-46L. Modification to the original CW20T prototype tail redesigned with a large single vertical tail fin and rudder, and a horizontal tailplane with no dihedral, and other improvements including a change to Pratt & Amp Whitney R2800-5 radial engine. It was used as a C-46 military transport prototype aircraft, also designated XC-46. Later sold to BOAC C-46 Commando, twin-engined military transport aircraft, powered by two 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Amp Whitney R2800-43 radial piston engines. C-46A Commando, twin-engined military transport aircraft, powered by two 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Amp Whitney R2800-51 radial piston engines, fitted with a large cargo door on the port side of the fuselage, equipped with strengthened cargo floor, a hydraulic winch and folding seats for up to 40 troops. XC-46B Commando. Once C-46A was converted into a test aircraft to evaluate a stepped windscreen design. It was powered by two 2,100 horsepower H2800-34W radial piston engines. XC-46C Commando later redesignated XC-113. C-46D Commando, twin-engined personnel paratroop transport aircraft, fitted with an extra door on the port side, 1,610 built. C-46C Commando, twin-engined utility transport aircraft, equipped with a large cargo door on the port side of the fuselage, fitted with a stepped windscreen, 17 built. C-46F Commando, twin-engined cargo transport aircraft, equipped with cargo doors on both sides of the fuselage, fitted with square-cut wingtips, 234 built. C-46G Commando. This one-off aircraft was fitted with a stepped windscreen and square wingtips, 1 built. C-46H, C-46J, a C-46K Commando and built version, intended to be powered by two 2,500 horsepower Wright R3350BD radial piston engines. XC-46K, XC-46L. In 1945, 3 C-46s were fitted with Wright R3350 radial piston engines. Engine change. One C-46G SN44789945 was converted into an engine testbed. The aircraft was fitted with a General Electric T31 turboprop in place of right-hand side R2800. The aircraft handled so poorly on the ground that it was never flown. Twin-engined military transport aircraft for the U.S. Marine Corps. similar to the C-46A Commando. 160 built C-46R Riddle Airlines conversion with modification kit which added 40 miles per hour to cruising speed and 2,204 ib to the payload. Riddle subsequently converted its own fleet of 32 to have 2,100 horsepower Pratt & Whitney engines. Operators: military operators, Argentina, Argentine Air Force, 2 aircraft. Bolivia, Bolivian Air Force. Transporter Aéreo Militar. Brazil, Brazilian Air Force. Republic of China Air Force. People's Republic of China People's Liberation Army Air Force. Colombia, Colombian Air Force, 1 aircraft. Cuba, Cuban Air Force. Dominican Republic, Dominican Air Force. Ecuador, Ecuadorian Air Force. Egypt, Haitian Air Corps. Honduras, Honduran Air Force. Israel, Israeli Air Force. Japan, Japan Air Self-Defense Force. South Korea, South Korean Air Force. Laos, Royal Lao Air Force. Mexico, Peru, Peruvian Air Force. Soviet Union, Soviet Air Force, 1 aircraft. United States Army Air Forces. United States Air Force. United States Marine Corps. United States Navy. Air America. Civil operators, Argentina Aeroplan. Aerotransportes Litoral Argentino. Aerovias Halcon. Australineas Aeras. Aerolíneas Carreras Transoftes Aéreos. Trans-American Air Transport. Transcontinental. Bolivia Air Beni. CAMBA Transportes Aéreos. Frigorifico Santa Rita. Las Líneas Aéreas Conado. NEBA Northeast Bolivian Airways. SAO Servicios Aéreos del Oriente. SkyTeam Flight Training. Brazil Aerogeral. Aeronaut. Aerovias Brazil. Companhia Itada de Transportes Aéreos. Linha Aérea Transcontinental Brasileira. Linhas Aéreas Paulistas. LAP. Loida Aéreo Nacional. NAB. Navegação Aérea Brasileira. Para-Ans Transportes Aéreos. Real Transportes Aéreos. SADIA. TABA. TAS Transportes Aéreos Salvador. Transportes Aéreos Nacional. Transportes Aéreos Universal. VRIG Canada Air Manitoba. Buffalo Airways. Commando Air Transport. Lambert. First Nations Transportation. Maritime Central Airways. Pacific Western Airlines. Worldwide Airways. Chile Linea Aérea Sudamericana. LASA. Colombia Aero Condor Colombia. Aeropesca Colombia. ARCA. Avianca. Coral Colombia. Republic of the Congo Congo Frigo. Costa Rica LACSA. Curaçao Carabecha Luke Transport. Dominican Republic Aeromar. Egypt Arabian American Airways. SAID Services Aériens Internationaux d'Égypte. Germany Lufthansa. Haiti Air Haiti. Honduras Servicio Aéreo de Honduras. Hong Kong Airways. Ireland Irish International Airlines. Israel Arkia. El Al. Italy Alitalia Linee Aérea Italiane. Società Aerea Mediterranea. Jordan Air Jordan. Kenya Relief Air Transport. Lebanon Lebanese International Airways. Luxembourg Airlines. Morocco Aigle Azza Maroc. Royal Air Maroc. Nicaragua LANICA. Norway Fred Olsen Air Transport. Paraguayan Airways Service. Servicios Aéreos del Paraguay 3 aircraft. Loida Aéreo Paraguayo S.A. 2 aircraft. Aerocarga Asociados 1 aircraft. International Products Corporation 1 aircraft. Peru Satco. Servicio Aéreo de Transportes Commercials. Sweden Fairline AB. Tor Air. Transair Sweden. Taiwan Civil Air Transport, a former operator. United Kingdom British Overseas Airways Corporation, United States Alaska Airlines, Capital Air, Civil Air Transport, Delta Airlines, Fairbanks Air Service, Flying Tiger Line, Revolution Airways, Resort Airlines, Riddle Airlines, Seaboard World Airlines, Tartan Duck Outfitters Limited, Wien Airlines, Zantop Air Transport, Uruguay Arco Aerolíneas Colonia S.A., Compañía Aeronáutica Uruguaya S.A., Venezuela Línea Aeropostal Venezolana. Survivors, accidents and incidents, specifications, general characteristics. Crew 4, capacity 40 troops, a 30 stretcher patients, a 15,000 pounds cargo, length 76 feet 4 in, wingspan 108 feet 0 in, height 21 feet 9 in, wing area 1,360 feet 2. Empty weight 30,669 pounds. Max takeoff weight 45,000 pounds. Power plant 2 times Pratt & Amp Whitney R2800-51 2-row 18-cylinder radial engines, 2,000 horsepower each. Performance maximum speed 270 miles per hour at 15,000 feet. Cruise speed 173 miles per hour. Range 3,150 miles. Service ceiling 24,500 feet. Rate of climb 1,175 feet per minute.